Here is part 1, written in simple, natural, human-centric storytelling. The boy had always been quiet. Most people at the public music hall barely noticed him when he walked in. They would be busy arranging their sheet music, chatting with friends, or adjusting the height of the piano bench. To them, he looked like any other young boy who might have wandered in by mistake. No one guessed he came there for a reason. No one guessed he carried a secret. He would sit on a bench near the corner, hands tucked into his pockets, his expression calm and unreadable. Sometimes he would watch the older students playing with fast, confident fingers. Other times he would stare at the black and white keys of the main piano as if they were calling him. But he never touched them when anyone was around. He just observed quietly, hoping no one would question him. The people who practiced at the hall had grown used to his presence. A few thought he was waiting for a sibling. Others assumed he was simply curious about music, but too shy to ask questions. Some ignored him completely. After all, he never caused trouble, never interrupted, and never spoke unless someone asked him something directly. One person, however, noticed him more than the others. She was a young woman who practiced in the hall almost every afternoon. She loved music and took her practice seriously. She would come in with her bag full of books, place it carefully near the wall, and begin her warm-up exercises. She often saw the boy sitting quietly, watching the piano with the kind of focus she usually saw only in dedicated learners. At first, she didn't think much of it. But after seeing him there day after day, always at the same time, always behaving the same way, she began to wonder about him. Why did he come here so often? Why did he always sit alone? Why did he watch the piano like he understood it better than he wanted anyone to know? One afternoon, when she was packing up her things, she saw him sitting a little closer to the piano than usual. The room was mostly empty, and the soft afternoon light made everything look warmer. She hesitated for a moment, then walked toward him. "Do you want to try playing?" she asked gently. His head lifted slightly, but he didn't answer. His shoulders tensed. For a second, she thought he might say yes. But instead, he shook his head, got up quietly, and walked out of the room. She watched him go, confused. She had only meant to be kind. After he left, she sat down on the bench and tried to understand what had happened. He didn't seem upset. He didn't seem angry. It was more like he was afraid of something. She wondered what it was. Maybe he didn't know how to play. Maybe he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of someone older. Or maybe it was something she couldn't guess. Meanwhile, the boy walked slowly down the hall, his mind crowded with thoughts. He knew she had only tried to help, but the idea of playing in front of someone made his heart race. He didn't want anyone to hear him yet. He didn't want to be judged or questioned. Music was the only thing in his life that felt safe, and he wasn't ready to risk losing that feeling. He stepped outside into the cool air. The city was loud, but he barely heard anything. His thoughts kept circling the same fear. What if he wasn't good enough? What if someone laughed? What if they told him to stop coming to the hall? That place was the closest thing he had to a proper training ground. He couldn't risk losing it. The next day, he returned as usual. He sat in his usual spot, and the young woman noticed him again. This time, she didn't approach him. She simply observed quietly while she practiced. She could feel he was uneasy, so she let him be. But now, she was curious in a way she hadn't been before. She sensed there was something more behind his silent behavior. Day after day, the same routine continued. The boy came, watched, listened, and left. The woman practiced, glanced at him occasionally, and wondered. The others still paid him no attention. As time passed, it became normal. But deep down, something felt unfinished. It was as if the boy was waiting for the right moment to step forward. And maybe the woman sensed that too. One evening, as she finished her practice, she realized she had left her music notebook behind. She turned back to the hall to get it. That small mistake would become the turning point she never expected. But for now, the boy remained a quiet figure in the background. Just a boy, as everyone assumed. What they didn't know was that behind his silence was a talent he had never shown to anyone. And sooner or later, it would change everything. Part 1 ends here. Let me know when you want Part 2 written the same way. The boy's world at home was very different from the music hall. He lived in a small apartment on the top floor of an old building. The walls were thin, the windows creaked when the wind blew, and the furniture was simple but clean. His mother worked long hours at a nearby store. She left early in the morning and returned late at night, usually tired but still trying to smile for him. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And the boy had his music. He didn't have a real piano. Instead, he had a small, worn-out keyboard someone had thrown away years ago. It had missing buttons, and some keys didn't produce any sound at all. But he had learned to make it work. He spent hours pressing the working keys gently, teaching himself melodies from old videos he found online. He watched the fingers of the pianists over and over, memorizing the movements, the pauses, and the emotions behind each note. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the videos loaded slowly. Sometimes the sound on his keyboard cracked. But he kept going. Music gave him peace. It made him feel like he had a voice, even when he wasn't speaking. His mother knew he loved music, but she didn't know how good he was. Every time she asked him to play something for her, he would smile softly and say maybe later. He didn't like performing for others yet. He felt safest when it was just him and the sound of the keys. When he found the public music hall, something in him changed. It was the first time he had ever touched a real piano. The first time he placed his fingers on smooth wooden keys instead of plastic ones. The first time he heard notes ring clearly, almost shining in the air. He never forgot that moment. Since then, the music hall became his secret sanctuary. He would visit whenever he finished helping his mother at home. He didn't tell her about it because he didn't want her to worry about him walking alone. And he didn't want her to feel guilty for not being able to afford lessons. At the hall, he always tried to arrive early or late times when the place wasn't crowded. He knew people thought he was just a quiet boy who wandered in and out of curiosity. He didn't mind. In some ways, it was easier that way. If no one expected anything from him, he could just observe, and he observed a lot. He watched the older students' practice scales, fast and smooth. He watched how their hands curved, how their wrists moved lightly, how they breathed with the music. He learned things no tutorial ever taught him. He memorized positions, techniques, small habits that made a big difference. He watched their mistakes too, knowing he would avoid them when he practiced in secret. But the young woman who played every afternoon, she was different. Her music wasn't just skillful. It was alive. She played with feeling, as if she spoke through the piano. He admired her more than he admired anyone else. Not because she was perfect, but because she cared deeply about what she played. He wished he could play with that kind of confidence. Sometimes when she wasn't around, he would stand near the piano she usually used. He felt something special about it, as if the instrument carried the warmth of her music. But he never touched it when people were in the room. He didn't want anyone to think he was trying to take something that wasn't his. When she asked him that day if he wanted to try playing, it felt like the ground shifted beneath him. No one had ever asked him something like that. The idea of playing in front of her scared him more than he expected. He wanted to say yes, but his fear of being judged held him back. So he did the only thing he knew. He walked away quietly. After that, he kept thinking about her words. "Do you want to try playing?" They echoed in his mind for days. Part of him wished he had stayed. Another part of him knew he wasn't ready. One night, when he returned home, his mother was sitting at the table eating a simple meal. She smiled when she saw him. "You're quiet today," she said gently. He shrugged and sat down across from her. He wanted to tell her everything: the music hall, the young woman, the piano he loved. But he couldn't bring himself to speak. Instead, he ate silently, lost in his thoughts. His mother reached across the table and touched his hand. "You work hard," she said softly. "I know you're trying your best." Her words warmed him, even though she didn't know the whole story. He went to sleep that night, thinking about the music hall again, imagining the notes he would play if he ever found the courage. The next afternoon, he returned as always. The young woman was already there, practicing a soft melody that filled the hall with a calm atmosphere. The boy sat in his usual spot. She noticed him, but she didn't speak. She didn't want to push him again. For the first few minutes, he simply listened. The way she played made him feel both calm and restless. Calm because her music was gentle. Restless because he wanted to play too. When she finished and began packing her things, their eyes met for a brief moment. She gave him a small, warm smile, not a questioning smile, not a pressuring one, just a simple acknowledgement. Something about that small gesture made him feel seen, but he still wasn't ready to approach her dot as days passed. The boy continued coming. He watched more closely than ever. He studied her movements carefully. He listened to the changes she made when she practiced the same song in different ways. Sometimes softer, sometimes faster, sometimes with more emotion. Each day, he felt his own desire to play grow stronger. Each day, he imagined the moment he would finally sit at that piano when no one was around. One evening, he stayed later than usual. The hall was quieter, and the lights were dim. He approached the piano, touched the smooth surface gently, and let out a deep breath. His hands trembled slightly. He looked around the room. Empty dot finally. He sat down. He placed his fingers on the keys, feeling the coolness. He closed his eyes and began playing a melody he had practiced for months on his old keyboard. But on a real piano, it sounded completely different, richer, fuller, alive. He played softly, afraid someone might walk in. Every note carried his feelings, his worries, his hopes, his silence. He didn't know it yet, but he played with more emotion than many trained players. And though he believed he was alone, he wasn't. Behind the door, someone had entered the hall quietly, someone who had forgotten a music notebook, someone who had never heard him play before. And when she heard the first few notes, she froze. She had never expected the quiet boy who always sat in the corner to play. Like that dot, but the moment had arrived. Her life and his were about to change in ways neither of them could have imagined. The hall was dim and quiet, the kind of quiet that made even the smallest sound feel louder than usual. The boy didn't notice anything around him. He didn't hear the door open. He didn't sense someone step inside. His whole world at that moment was the piano. His fingers moved slowly across the keys, almost as if he was afraid to disturb the air around him. He wasn't playing loudly. In fact, the melody was soft enough that a person walking outside the room might miss it. But to the one standing at the doorway, it was impossible to ignore. The young woman who had returned for her missing notebook stopped as soon as she heard the first few notes. At first, she thought someone else might be practicing. Maybe one of the older students was warming up for a late session. But when she walked a little closer and saw the small figure sitting at the piano, her breath caught Dot. It was him, the quiet boy who always watched from the corner. The boy who never spoke unless he had to. The boy who refused to play when she asked him. She stood completely still, afraid that moving might break the moment. She listened carefully, trying to understand what she was hearing. The piece he played wasn't something simple. It wasn't a beginner's tune. It wasn't even something she had ever seen a child attempt. He played with both hands in perfect coordination, something that took most students years to learn. His timing was clean, his emotion clear, and his touch gentle yet confident. Even his posture surprised her. He sat with a natural ease she rarely saw in young learners. It didn't make sense. How could someone who never practiced in front of others play like that? She moved slowly, staying near the back of the room. He still hadn't noticed her. His eyes were half closed, as if he was lost inside the music. Every note he played felt real, full of feeling, full of something deeper than simple practice. The woman felt a strange warmth in her chest as she listened. She wasn't just surprised, she was moved. She had heard many talented students before, but something about his playing carried a kind of purity she hadn't heard in a long time. Maybe it was the honesty in the sound. Maybe it was the way he played, as if the piano was the only place where he felt free. Minutes passed. The room felt almost sacred. When he finally reached the end of the piece, his hands rested on the keys for a moment before slowly lifting away. He exhaled softly, the way a person does when they've released something heavy inside them. That was when he heard the faintest sound. A gentle shift of a shoe against the floor. He froze, his eyes opened wide. His heart dropped. He turned quickly, and the moment his eyes landed on her, fear washed across his face. He stood up too fast, almost knocking the bench over. His hands trembled. He stepped back from the piano, as if he wasn't supposed to be near it. I'm sorry, he whispered, barely loud enough for her to hear. He looked like he was ready to run, but she wasn't angry. She wasn't annoyed. She wasn't even thinking about her notebook anymore. She took a careful step forward, her voice soft and steady. Wait. Please don't be scared. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the door. He wasn't sure what to expect. Every part of him told him he had made a mistake. He had played too loudly. He had stayed too long. He had been caught. You were playing beautifully, she said, her tone filled with genuine admiration. He didn't respond. His chest rose and fell quickly as he tried to steady his breathing. You don't have to apologize, she added. I'm glad I heard you. The boy shook his head slowly. I wasn't supposed to. He muttered, unsure how to finish the sentence. She moved closer, but kept a respectful distance, not wanting to overwhelm him. You can play here, she said gently. You're not doing anything wrong. He lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. People will think I don't belong here. Her heart ached at those words. You belong here as much as anyone else, she said softly. Anyone who loves music belongs here. He didn't answer. He looked small, unsure, and nervous, like someone who had carried fear inside him for a long time. But she wasn't going to let him walk away this time. Can I ask you something? She said. He looked up just a little. How long have you been playing? He hesitated. A few years, he whispered. Did someone teach you? Again, a pause. No. I learned from videos. She felt her eyes widen slightly. Videos? Just videos? It seemed impossible, yet here he was, playing pieces many trained students struggled with. You learned all that by yourself? She asked softly. He nodded, unsure if that was the right answer. That's incredible, she said, her voice full of awe. He didn't know how to react. Compliments felt unfamiliar. Praise felt foreign. I didn't mean to bother anyone, he murmured. You didn't, she said. You inspired me? His eyes lifted a little more. He didn't expect that. She walked toward the piano slowly and touched the top of it with gentle fingers. You play with such feeling, she said. It's rare to hear something so honest. He stood still, almost afraid to breathe. Can you play something else? She asked. His eyes widened again. I don't know. You don't have to if you're uncomfortable, she said quickly. Only if you feel okay. He looked at the piano, then at her. The fear was still there, but now something else had joined it: curiosity, hope, a small desire to trust Dot after a long moment. He walked slowly back toward the bench. He sat down cautiously, keeping his eyes down. Just a little, he whispered. She smiled warmly. Just a little. His fingers touched the keys again, but this time they trembled at first. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Slowly, he began a different melody, one he made himself. The woman stood beside the piano, listening with her full attention. The tune was simple, but filled with emotion, rising and falling gently like a soft breeze. When he finished, he didn't turn right away. He waited, bracing himself for whatever came next. That was beautiful, she said quietly. You have a gift. He swallowed, unsure how to respond. Do you come here to practice often? She asked. He nodded slowly. Maybe. We can practice at the same time, she suggested softly. He looked up at her, surprised. With you? Yes, she said with a gentle smile. If you're comfortable with that. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. I don't want to disturb you, he whispered. You don't, she replied. And you won't. He sat quietly for a moment, letting her words sink in. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever asked him to play more. No one had ever called his music beautiful. Something inside him softened. I'll try, he said softly. Her smile widened just a little, warm and encouraging. Good, she said. We can start tomorrow. For the first time since she had met him, he gave a very small, shy smile in return. That night, as he walked home, the world felt different. The street lights looked brighter. The air felt lighter. His steps felt steadier. He replayed her words in his mind again and again. You inspired me. You have a gift. You belong here. No one had ever said those things to him, and for once, he let himself believe them. The next afternoon would not be like the others. There would be no silent watching from the corner, no hiding, no fear. For the first time, he would walk into the hall, not as the quiet boy everyone misunderstood, but as someone who had finally been seen. And everything was about to change from that moment forward. The next day came with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness for the boy. As he stepped out of his building, he felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. The afternoon sun was warm, the streets busy as usual, but everything around him felt different. He was about to do something he had never done before: play the piano while someone else was in the room. Not just anyone, but someone who believed in him. He walked slowly, his small backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. Inside the bag was nothing special, just a bottle of water and a small snack his mother insisted he take everywhere. Still, he held the strap tightly as he made his way to the music hall, his heart beating faster the closer he got. When he stepped inside, he found the young woman already there. She was sitting at the piano bench, gently going through her warm-up exercises. The sound of her fingers brushing lightly over the keys filled the room with a calm rhythm. When she noticed him entering, she didn't make a big gesture. She simply gave him a warm smile, steady, welcoming, and patient. You came, she said softly. He nodded, keeping his eyes low. I said I would try. That's enough, she replied with kindness. She moved slightly on the bench, giving him space to sit on the side if he wanted. But he stayed standing for a moment, unsure where he should go or what he should do. You don't have to rush, she said. You can sit whenever you feel comfortable. Her voice helped him breathe a little easier. He walked slowly toward the extra bench near the corner, the same place he had always sat before. But this time, instead of hiding, he sat with his back straight, trying to stay open, present, and brave. the woman began practicing a gentle piece, something soft enough not to overwhelm him, but still expressive enough to warm up her fingers. The boy watched quietly at first, studying her hands like he always did. He noticed the small bends in her fingers, the smooth movement of her wrists, the way she breathed in before each phrase. After a few moments, she glanced over and said, "Would you like to try playing first today? Or would you rather I play a bit more?" He hesitated. The urge to hide rose again. But he reminded himself of the promise he made the night before to try. "I can." "Try," he whispered. She shifted to the side, giving him full access to the piano. He approached slowly, feeling the weight of the moment as he sat down. The piano felt bigger than usual. The keys seemed brighter. His hands trembled as he placed them on the surface. "It doesn't have to be perfect," she said gently. "Play whatever you feel like." He nodded softly, took a deep breath, and pressed the first note. It rang out clear and warm. His shoulders relaxed just a little. He began playing the same melody as the night before, the one he had created himself. It was simple, quiet, and personal. He played it slowly, focusing on each note, each breath, every small detail. She listened with full attention, her expression soft and focused. She didn't interrupt. She didn't comment. She didn't correct him. She simply let him play. When he finished, the silence that followed felt gentle instead of heavy. "That was beautiful," she said. "Even more than yesterday." He lowered his gaze, a shy smile forming. Compliments still felt strange, but this time they didn't scare him. "Would you like to learn something new today?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "You'll teach me?" "If you'd like me to," she said with a warm nod. He paused, then whispered, "Yes." She chose a small piece one that wasn't too complicated, but still expressive. It had slow movements, soft highs, and calm lows. She played it once first, letting him hear the full shape of it. Then she stood behind him, gently explaining where to place his fingers. Her instructions were calm, never rushed. She watched his hands carefully, guiding him only when needed. The boy listened closely, trying his best to follow. At first, his fingers stumbled. The rhythm wasn't steady. His timing felt off. But she encouraged him with every small step. "That's good. Try this finger here. Take your time. You're doing well." The more she encouraged him, the more confident he became. After a few tries, the piece began to take shape under his hands. It still wasn't perfect, but it was music, real music. As the minutes passed, the tension in his shoulders faded. He began to enjoy the feeling of learning something new, something guided. He wasn't alone this time. And that changed everything. After a while, she asked if she could play along with him. His eyes widened, but he nodded. She sat beside him and placed her hands on the lower keys while he handled the upper ones. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded again. They began playing together. The sound that filled the room was gentle yet full, like two voices speaking softly to each other. At first, he felt overwhelmed, but soon he found a quiet harmony with her. Their notes blended slowly, beautifully. She kept her part simple so he wouldn't feel lost. The boy felt something he had never felt before. Belonging. When they finished, he let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "That was amazing," she said with a soft smile. He looked at his hands and murmured, "I didn't know I could play with someone." "You can," she said. "You're a natural." He didn't know what to say. No one had ever seen him this way. No one had ever shared music with him. He felt a warmth in his chest that stayed even after he stepped away from the piano. She packed her things but didn't leave immediately. Instead, she asked, "Do you come here every day?" He nodded. "Most days." "Then maybe we can practice together whenever we meet." If you'd like. He lowered his head shyly. I'd like that. She smiled again. Good. And if you ever want to learn something in particular, just tell me. I'll help you. The boy felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: support. After she left, he stayed a few minutes longer, touching the piano keys gently as if thanking them. Then he gathered his backpack and went home. That evening, his mother noticed something different the moment he walked in. You look happy, she said softly. He tried to hide his smile, but he couldn't. I learned a new song today, he whispered. Her eyes widened. You did? He nodded. Someone helped me. That's wonderful, she said warmly. He didn't tell her everything. Not yet. But he felt proud in a way he had never felt before. For the next several days, the boy returned to the hall, and each time, the young woman was there too. Sometimes she taught him new pieces. Sometimes they played duets. Sometimes they just talked a little, nothing too personal. Just enough to make him feel safe. Little by little, he opened up. He told her how he learned from videos. He told her why he had been too scared to play in front of others. He told her how much he loved the sound of the piano. As she listened, truly listened, in return. She shared her own thoughts. She told him how music helped her through difficult days. She told him how she practiced for hours to improve. Told him how important it was to play from the heart. They weren't just teacher and student. They were two people connected by the same love. Music. Soon, others in the hall began noticing the change. The boy no longer sat quietly in the corner. He now sat at the piano, practicing with focus and courage. Some people watched him with curiosity, some with surprise, some with admiration. He didn't hide anymore. Every day, he grew a little more confident, but neither he nor the young woman knew that something even bigger was coming. Something that would reveal the boy's talent to far more people than either of them expected. All it would take was one moment, one opportunity to show the world what she already knew. Wasn't just a quiet boy. He was a musician waiting to be seen. The hall felt different that morning, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The boy stood near the entrance, his hands folded together, lightly shaking. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the weight of knowing this moment mattered more than anything before it. The young woman who had guided him stood beside him, trying to make him relax. She didn't speak much, because she knew too many words right now would only make him more nervous. Instead, she just gave him a gentle nod, the kind that told him he wasn't alone. He looked around as people began filling the seats. There were older musicians, young students, teachers, and even a few people from local music groups. Some looked serious, others looked bored, and a few whispered while glancing his way. He knew exactly what they were thinking. Just a boy. Probably someone who wandered in by mistake. Probably someone who would play a simple tune and leave. He had seen that look many times. In parks, in the music hall, in the small coffee shop where he sometimes played softly on an old keyboard when the owner let him. It never upset him. It only reminded him how people judged before they understood anything. But today was different. Today, he wanted to show what he carried inside. Not to impress. Not to prove anything. But because music had been the only thing that made him feel seen, even when no one was looking. When his turn was finally called, he felt his heart jump, but he walked forward with slow steps. The woman stayed back, watching him from the side. She believed in him more than he believed in himself, and that thought alone gave him enough strength to sit at the piano. The moment he placed his fingers on the keys, the room faded. The noise, the judgment, the whispers, everything slipped away. He took one deep breath. This was the same piano he had played many times when the hall was empty. It creaked in the same places. The keys responded in the same familiar way. Then he started, The first note rang out, soft but clear. People who had been talking paused. Some leaned forward. His hands moved slowly at first, then grew more confident as the melody unfolded. It wasn't a famous piece. It wasn't something anyone would recognize. He had created this one himself over months of late-night practice. It held the warmth of memories he couldn't explain in words. It held the cold nights he spent sitting alone near the window, trying not to wake his mother. It held the quiet dreams he kept to himself because he thought no one would take them seriously. It held everything he never said out loud. The more he played, the more the room changed. The judges, who moments before had been flipping through papers, now listened closely. The musicians who thought they had seen everything suddenly looked curious. A few people in the back set down their phones and watched with genuine interest. The woman standing by the wall felt her eyes sting, not from sadness, but from pride. She knew the boy was good, but hearing him now, in front of people who didn't expect anything from him, made her realize he was not just talented. He was rare. The music rose and fell like waves. Some notes were soft like footsteps on early mornings, while others carried the force of storms he had lived through alone. Every movement of his hands told a story, even though he never planned it that way. This was just how he felt. How he breathed. By the time he reached the final part of the piece, the room was completely silent. Not a single cough. Not a chair moving. Not even a whisper. The last note floated gently, lingering long after his fingers left the keys. For a moment, he stayed still, afraid to look up. All he could hear was his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. And something happened he didn't expect. The entire hall broke into applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It wasn't the kind people gave just to be kind. It was real loud, warm. Some people even stood up. The woman had to cover her mouth with her hand because she felt her heart swell with emotion. The boy looked around in confusion. Then a soft smile touched his face. Not a wide smile, just a small, shy one, like he wasn't sure he deserved all of this. The judges called him forward. One of them told him that he had something special, something that couldn't be taught. Another said his music carried emotion that many older musicians struggled to express. Someone else asked him where he learned to play that way, but he didn't know how to answer. He simply said he learned by watching videos and practicing alone. The room fell quiet again, this time out of shock. They told him he had earned a place in the youth program. Not just a place, he had earned a top spot. Opportunities that once felt impossible were suddenly open to him. After everything was done, the woman walked to him. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. She placed her hand lightly on his shoulder and whispered, "I'm proud of you." Those words landed deeper than the applause. He looked at her with grateful eyes because he knew that without her, he would still be hiding his music in empty rooms. They walked out of the hall together. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long while. Light. As if the world wasn't as heavy anymore. As if something inside him had finally opened. People who once saw him as just a quiet boy now saw him with curiosity and respect. Some even approached to congratulate him. He didn't know what his future would look like, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid to imagine it. That evening, as he headed home with the woman beside him, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in soft colors. He felt calm, confident, and grateful. He didn't need fancy words to describe what he felt. He didn't need to explain his dreams. His music had spoken for him, and it had finally been heard.